Welcome to this channel where every night a new horror story drags you deeper than the last. Before anything else, hit subscribe right now. If you miss even one night, you'll miss the piece that connects all these stories into something far darker. Comment below where you're watching from and what time it is. I want to know exactly who's awake inside the dark with us. And listen carefully. This story has something hidden, a moment so disturbing, so unexpected, that most people don't recognize it until the very end. If you leave early, you'll never know what really happened. So stay with me, all the way to the final second, the hollow that remembers. My name is Sarah Whitlock, and I grew up in a holler so deep in the Kentucky mountains that even the Postal Service gave up on us in 1987. My family had lived in that hollow for 6 generations, farming tobacco and keeping to ourselves. What happened in the summer of 2019 made me understand why my grandfather always said certain parts of our land were forbidden. I was 28 years old, visiting from Lexington where I'd moved for college. My grandmother had passed that spring, and I returned to help my father sort through her belongings. The old cabin sat at the end of a dirt road that wound 3 miles from the nearest paved highway. Fog clung to the mountains there even in July, thick and wet like something alive. On my 3rd night back, I found a journal in my grandmother's cedar chest. The leather was cracked, the pages yellowed and brittle. Inside, written in her careful script, were entries dating back to 1952. Most were mundane observations about weather and crops, but one entry, dated October 13, 1952, stopped me cold. The girl came back again today, still wearing the same blue dress, still asking for her mother. I told her like always that her mother is gone, has been gone for 70 years. She smiled at me with those empty eyes and walked back toward the tree line. James says I should stop feeding her, but I can't help it. She's so hungry. I read it 3 times, my skin prickling. The next dozen entries mentioned this girl repeatedly. My grandmother left food on the porch. The girl never aged, never changed clothes, always asked the same question. I showed the journal to my father that night. His face went pale in the kerosene lamplight. We had no electricity that deep in the mountains. He closed the journal carefully and looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. "Your grandmother wasn't well toward the end," he said, but his hands shook as he handed the journal back. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 2 in the morning, I heard footsteps on the porch. Slow, deliberate steps. A child's weight on old wooden boards. Then a small voice, high and sweet, drifted through the walls. "Is my mother here?" I sat frozen in my grandmother's bed, every muscle locked. The footsteps moved across the porch, back and forth, back and forth. The voice came again, closer to my window. "Is my mother here? I've been looking so long." I forced myself to the window and pulled back the thin curtain. In the moonlight, I saw her, a girl of maybe 8 years old, wearing a blue dress that hung in tatters. Her feet were bare and muddy, but her face was wrong. The features were there, but they shifted slightly, like I was seeing her through water. Her eyes were hollow spaces that seemed to pull at the light around them. She turned her head toward my window with mechanical precision. Her mouth moved, but the voice came from everywhere at once. "Is my mother here?" I stumbled backward, my throat closed with fear. The footsteps continued for another hour before fading into silence. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. The next morning, I found small, muddy footprints on the porch. They led from the steps to my window and back again. I also found something else, a piece of faded blue fabric caught on a nail, brittle with age. My father saw me examining it and finally told me. The truth. In 1882, a family had lived in our hollow. During a particularly harsh winter, they'd run out of food. The mother went to the nearest town for supplies and never returned. The daughter waited on the porch for weeks, refusing to believe her mother wasn't coming back. She died there, still waiting. Still asking your great-great-grandfather found her in the spring, my father said quietly. Buried her proper in the family plot, but she never stopped waiting. I searched the overgrown cemetery behind the cabin that afternoon. Most of the stones were illegible, worn smooth by more than a century of mountain weather. But I found one small marker, the name barely visible, Emma Catherine Moore. 1874 to 1882, beloved daughter. That night I left a plate of food on the porch like my grandmother had done. I also left a note, though I felt foolish doing it. Your mother loved you. She didn't want to leave. She would want you to rest now. The footsteps came again at 2 in the morning. I heard the small voice, but this time it sounded different. Sad, lost. The footsteps crossed the porch once, twice, then stopped. I heard a sound like a child crying, so faint it might have been the wind, then nothing. In the morning the food was gone, so was the note. The muddy footprints led from the porch to the cemetery and stopped at Emma's grave. I never heard the footsteps again. I sold the property 6 months later. My father moved to town, relieved to leave. But sometimes, late at night in my Lexington apartment, I wake up thinking I hear those small feet on old wooden boards, and a voice, high and sweet and infinitely sad, asking a question that has no answer. The new owners called me once, about a year after the sale. They'd found my grandmother's journal in the attic. They wanted to know if the entries about the girl were true. I told them it was just the ramblings of an old woman losing her memory. They seemed satisfied with that answer, but I lied, because some things in those deep Appalachian hollows don't follow the rules of the living world. Some things wait forever, asking questions that will never be answered, wearing the same clothes they died in, walking the same paths they walked when they still drew breath. And some families, like mine, learn to live alongside them, leaving food on porches and pretending that the impossible isn't happening just outside their windows. The hollow remembers everything, and it never lets go. Story second, the thing in the coal seam. My name is Marcus Webb, and I worked in the abandoned coal mines beneath Harlan County, Kentucky for 12 years before I understood why they'd been abandoned in the first place. I wasn't a miner by trade. I was a geologist, contracted by the state to survey old mining sites for potential environmental hazards. The pay was good, the work was solitary, and I preferred being underground to dealing with people. In September 2021, I was assigned to map the Bennett Seam, a mine system that had been closed since 1967. The official records said it shut down due to depleted coal reserves, but the unofficial stories from old-timers in town told a different story. They said the miners had dug too deep and found something that wasn't coal. When I asked what they found, the old men would just shake their heads and change the subject. The Bennett Seam entrance was overgrown with kudzu and mountain laurel. My equipment barely fit through the collapsed mouth of the mine. Inside, the air was cold and damp, smelling of mineral deposits and something else, something organic and rotten. My headlamp cut through darkness so complete it felt solid. The main shaft descended at a 30-degree angle for approximately 2,000 feet. The walls were scored with pickaxe marks and occasional graffiti from the last miners. Most of it was mundane. Names, dates, crude drawings. But one message, carved deep into the coal face about 1,500 feet down, made me pause. It's still here. Don't go to the bottom. 1967. I photographed it for my report and continued down. I was a scientist. I didn't believe in superstitious minor tales. The shaft branched into a dozen smaller tunnels at the 2,000-foot mark. I chose the largest branch and followed it deeper into the mountain. The tunnel opened into a natural cavern after another 500 feet. My instruments showed it was enormous, maybe 200 feet across. But what caught my attention was the smell. That organic rot smell was overwhelming here, thick enough to taste. And something else, a sound, a wet, rhythmic sound like something breathing. I swept my headlamp across the cavern and froze. The far wall wasn't rock, it was moving, expanding and contracting with that breathing rhythm. The surface was pale and membranous, threaded with black veins that pulsed with slow circulation. It looked like skin, like the inside of something alive. My rational mind tried to categorize what I was seeing. A geological formation, a bacterial colony. Anything except what it actually looked like. The interior wall of something vast and living, something that had grown through the coal seam like roots through soil. I took a step backward and my boot struck something. I looked down and saw bones. Human bones. A skull with a mining helmet still attached. The lamp long dead. Around it, more remains. I counted 7 bodies, all in various states of decay. The newest looked only a few years old. The breathing sound changed. It became faster, more agitated. The membranous wall rippled, and something moved beneath its surface, something large. I watched in horror as a shape pressed against the membrane from behind, distorting it outward. It looked like a hand. A massive hand with too many fingers. I ran. My equipment clattered behind me as I sprinted back toward the main shaft. Behind me, I heard a sound like tearing fabric. Then footsteps. Heavy, uneven footsteps that echoed through the tunnel. And breathing. That wet, labored breathing right behind me. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I just ran through the darkness, my headlamp bouncing wildly, illuminating glimpses of tunnel wall and nothing else. The footsteps stayed close, matching my pace, sometimes ahead of me, sometimes behind, sometimes impossibly on the walls. I burst out of the mine entrance and into daylight, gasping and covered in coal dust. I turned back to the entrance, expecting to see something emerge. But there was nothing, just darkness and that wet breathing sound, fading slowly into silence. I reported the bodies to the authorities. A recovery team went down 2 days later. They found nothing, no bones, no cavern. The tunnel I'd followed ended in a collapse, they said. Impossible to pass. When I insisted, showed them my photographs, they looked at me with pity. The images showed only empty tunnels and rock formations. The breathing wall, the bones, all gone. But I had one more photograph, one I didn't show them. A selfie I'd taken for documentation at the cavern entrance, standard procedure. In the background, barely visible in the darkness beyond my headlamp's reach, was a face, pale, elongated, with eyes that reflected the light like an animal's, and a mouth open impossibly wide. I quit geology after that. Now I work retail in Lexington, selling hardware to contractors who don't ask questions. But sometimes I wake up at night, sheets soaked with sweat, because I've been dreaming of being underground again, of that wet breathing sound, of walls that move like skin. The Bennett seam is still there, sealed now with concrete and steel. But I know it doesn't matter. Whatever is down there has been there longer than the coal, longer than the mountains themselves. The miners didn't dig too deep. They just finally dug far enough to notice what had always been there, sleeping in the darkness, breathing slowly, waiting. And it's still waiting. Story third, the revival tent. My name is Rebecca Holloway, and in the summer of 2018, I made the mistake of attending a revival in the mountains of eastern Tennessee. I was 32 years old, recently divorced, and desperately searching for something to fill the emptiness inside me. I'd grown up Baptist, but drifted away from faith after college. When I saw the flyers posted around Gatlinburg advertising a week-long revival in God's true country, something pulled me toward it. The directions led me up a Forest Service road that deteriorated from gravel to bare dirt. My sedan barely made it. The revival tent stood in a clearing surrounded by old-growth forest, white canvas glowing in the late afternoon sun. Maybe 60 people milled around folding chairs, all locals by their dress and manner. They watched me approach with expressions I couldn't quite read, not hostile, not welcoming, just watchful. The preacher was a man named Silas Cobb, tall and gaunt with eyes that burned with certainty. His voice carried across the clearing without need for amplification. That night, he preached about sin and redemption, about the old ways that the modern world had forgotten. His words were hypnotic, weaving through Bible verses I'd never heard before. In these mountains, he said, the veil is thin. The old powers still walk, but so does the Lord if you know how to call him proper. The service lasted 3 hours. People spoke in tongues. Some collapsed, shaking and crying. Silas laid hands on them and spoke words in a language that hurt my ears to hear. When it was over, I felt changed somehow, hollowed out and filled with something else, something cold. I went back the next night, and the next. Each service grew stranger. Silas talked less about Jesus and more about the old bargains made by the first settlers in these mountains, about prices paid in blood and faith, about things that lived in the deep places and demanded worship. On the 4th night, Silas called for testimonies. One by one, people stood and confessed their sins. But their confessions were wrong. A woman described murdering her husband in vivid detail, smiling as she spoke. A man talked about the children he'd buried in his basement, counting them on his fingers. Everyone applauded after each testimony, including me. I couldn't stop myself. That's when I realized I hadn't seen anyone leave the revival, not once in 4 days. We were all sleeping in our cars or in tents near the clearing. We were all eating from the same pot of stew that simmered constantly over an open fire. And we were all changing. People's faces looked different, longer, eyes set wider apart, teeth that seemed sharper. On the 5th night, Silas announced it was time for the true revival, time to wake what had been sleeping. He led us into the forest, following a trail marked with symbols carved into trees. The symbols looked old, older than the trees themselves. They hurt to look at, twisting in ways that defied geometry. We walked for hours, deeper into the mountains than any trail should go. The forest grew darker, the trees more twisted. Eventually, we reached a clearing with a pool of black water at its center. The water didn't reflect the moon or stars. It didn't reflect anything. Silas told us the pool was a doorway. That something on the other side had been calling to him for years. That tonight, we would be the key to opening it fully. He needed our faith, our belief, our souls offered willingly. I watched as the first person walked into the pool. A young man, maybe 20. He didn't sink. He dissolved, breaking apart like ink in water. But his scream continued long after his body vanished, echoing from the pool's surface. That broke whatever hold Silas had on me. I ran. Behind me, I heard Silas shouting for the others to stop me, but his voice sounded wrong now, multiplied, coming from several mouths at once. I didn't look back. I crashed through the forest, branches tearing my clothes and skin. I had no idea which direction I was running. The trees, All looked the same, and the moonlight barely penetrated the canopy. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs gave out. I woke at dawn, lying on the Forest Service road a quarter mile from where I'd parked. My car was gone, so were all the other vehicles. The clearing where the revival tent had stood was empty. No tent, no chairs, no fire pit, just undisturbed grass and trees. Even the tire tracks were gone. I stumbled to the main road and eventually flagged down a park ranger. He looked at my torn clothes and wild story with obvious skepticism, but he drove me to the location I described. There was nothing there. No clearing, just dense forest that looked like it hadn't been disturbed in decades. The ranger said there were no records of any revival permit, no preacher named Silas Cobb. When I described the other attendees, he went quiet. Finally, he told me that over the past 30 years, people occasionally went missing in this section of the mountains. Usually outsiders, usually people searching for something. Their cars were always found abandoned on Forest Service roads. I filed a missing persons report for the people I'd met. Nothing ever came of it. I gave descriptions, details, everything I could remember. The investigators were polite but dismissive. No evidence, no bodies, no crime. But I kept investigating on my own. I found references to revivals in these mountains dating back to the 1800s. Always the same pattern. A charismatic preacher, a tent in a clearing, people who walked into the forest and never came back. The descriptions of the preacher varied, but the name was always similar. Silas, Cyrus, Josiah. Always biblical, always Old Testament. I also found something else. In the Historical Society archives in Knoxville, I discovered a journal from 1847, a missionary describing his attempt to save the savage souls practicing devil worship in the deep mountains. He wrote about finding a pool of black water where the locals conducted ceremonies. He tried to stop them and was chased into the forest. The last entry in his journal was a single sentence. I can hear him preaching now, using my own words, wearing my own face. God forgive me for what I have become. I live in Nashville now, as far from the mountains as I can get while staying in Tennessee. I don't go to church anymore. Can't bring myself to sit in a congregation, to hear a preacher's voice echoing off walls, because sometimes, late at night, I still hear Silas Cobb preaching. His words come through my radio, my television, the static between stations. And every year, on the anniversary of that revival, I receive a postcard. No return address, no message, just a picture of a white tent in a forest clearing. The postmark is always from a different small town in the Appalachian Mountains. Different town, but always the same mountains. The revival never ended. It just moved on, carrying its tent and its hunger to the next clearing, the next group of lost souls searching for salvation. And somewhere in those deep mountains, there's a pool of black water that doesn't reflect light. And Silas Cobb, or whatever wears his face now, is still preaching to the faithful, still calling them into the forest, still feeding them to the darkness. Story 4th, the photograph. My name is Daniel Reeves, and I found a photograph in my late grandfather's belongings that showed me standing in a place I'd never been, in a time before I was born. The photograph changed everything I thought I understood about my family in these mountains. I was 35 years old when my grandfather died in 2020. He'd lived his entire life in a cabin near the North Carolina-Tennessee border, barely ever leaving the mountains. He was 93, sharp as a tack until the end. At his funeral, my mother mentioned that he'd left specific instructions for me to sort through his personal effects alone. The cabin was exactly as I remembered from childhood visits. Sparse furniture, wood stove, shelves lined with old books and mason jars. His bedroom closet contained 3 cardboard boxes marked Daniel in his shaky handwriting. Inside the first box were newspaper clippings about me. My high school graduation, my wedding announcement, my promotion to professor at UNC. Nothing unusual. The second box contained letters he'd written but never sent, all addressed to me. I read through them with growing confusion. They referenced conversations we'd never had, warned me about choices I'd never made, mentioned a sister I didn't have. The third box contained a single photograph in a leather frame. The image was black and white, faded but clear. It showed a group of men standing in front of a mine entrance. The clothing and cars in the background dated it to the 1940s. My grandfather stood on the left, young and recognizable. But on the right side of the photograph stood me, same height, same build, same birthmark on my neck, wearing 1940s work clothes, holding a mining helmet. The man looked exactly like me, down to the small scar above my left eyebrow that I got falling off my bike in 1992. On the back of the photograph, written in my grandfather's handwriting, Gray Hollow Mine, October 15th, 1943. You told me it would happen again. You were right, I'm sorry. I sat in that cabin for 3 hours, staring at the photograph. My rational mind rejected what I was seeing. Ancestor who looked like me. Coincidence. But the scar, the exact placement of that scar, that couldn't be coincidence. I drove to the county records office the next morning. After 6 hours of searching through archives, I found references to the Gray Hollow Mine. It had operated for only 2 years before closing suddenly in late 1943. The official reason was cited as irregular geological formations. 17 miners had disappeared during its operation. Their bodies were never recovered. The list of disappeared miners didn't include anyone matching my description, but there was a notation in the margins of the report, handwritten by the investigating officer, additional man witnessed by multiple sources. No employment records, no identification, disappeared same day as others. I found the location of the Gray Hollow Mine on an old survey map. The entrance had been sealed with concrete decades ago, the access road reclaimed by forest. It took me 6 hours of hiking through dense woods to find it. The concrete seal was still intact, but someone had carved words into it, the letters weathered but legible. We're still waiting. Time moves different here. That night, I dreamed I was in the mine, walking through tunnels lit by lanterns, following my grandfather's young voice calling from up ahead. The dream felt more real than memory. I could smell the coal dust, feel the weight of the helmet on my head. We reached a chamber where time itself seemed broken. I could see the same space in multiple eras simultaneously, miners from different decades working side by side, unaware of each other. My grandfather turned to me and said, "You came back, just like you said you would. How many times now?" I woke up screaming. I returned to the cabin and tore it apart, searching for more clues. In the crawl space beneath the floor, I found them. Dozens more photographs spanning decades, each showing me at different historical periods, always near the Gray Hollow Mine. Me in 1920s clothing, me in Depression-era work clothes, me in 1960s attire, always the same face, always the same scar, and letters, hundreds of letters in my own handwriting but not my handwriting, similar but slightly different each time, all addressed to my grandfather at different ages, all trying to warn him about the mine. All signed Daniel with the date I was born, April 3rd, 1985. One letter, dated 1962, read, "I don't know how to stop this. Every time I think I've prevented it, I wake up and it's starting again. The mine pulls me back. Time folds around that place like a fist. I'm trapped in a loop. That spans a century. You have to destroy the photograph. Maybe that will break the cycle. But he hadn't destroyed it. He'd saved it, left it for me to find. That was 3 years ago. Since then, I've experienced increasing episodes of lost time. I'll be teaching a class or eating dinner, and suddenly I'm standing in the forest near the sealed mine entrance, wearing clothes I don't recognize, my pockets filled with coal dust. I've stopped trying to explain it to people. Last month, I found myself at the county records office with no memory of driving there. I'd filed a mining permit application for the Gray Hollow mine. The handwriting was mine, the signature was mine, but I don't remember doing it. The application was dated 1956. I've started writing letters to my family, instructions for after I disappear, because I know now that I will disappear. It's already happened. I've already lived this loop dozens, maybe hundreds of times. Each iteration I try to change things. Each time I end up in that mine, trapped in a moment that keeps repeating across decades. The photograph sits on my desk now. I've tried to burn it, tear it, bury it. It always returns, perfectly intact. Sometimes there are more people in it, sometimes fewer, but I'm always there, standing in 1943, looking directly at the camera with an expression of absolute despair. My grandfather's final letter to me, the one I found last week hidden in his Bible, explained everything. The mine had broken through into something in 1943, not just rock and coal, but time itself, a pocket where past and present and future existed simultaneously. Anyone who entered got caught in it, their timeline fractured across decades. The 17 miners didn't disappear. They're still there, living their last day over and over across different eras. And I'm one of them now. Have been one of them for longer than I've been alive. Tomorrow, I'll wake up, and it will be October 15th, 1943. I'll be standing at the entrance to the Gray Hollow mine with my grandfather's young face, watching me from the crowd. I'll walk inside because I always walk inside. And then I'll wake up in 2023, and the cycle will continue. This letter is my attempt to leave a warning for whoever finds it. Don't search for the Gray Hollow mine. Don't try to understand what happened there. Some places exist outside normal time, and they're hungry for people who ask too many questions. I've been dying in that mine for 80 years, and I'll keep dying there for 80 more. The photograph is proof. I'm already there, trapped in October 1943, living the same moment endlessly. Time doesn't heal all wounds. Sometimes it just makes them infinite. Story 5th, the woman who wouldn't leave. My name is Thomas Garrett, and I moved into my grandmother's house in the mountains of West Virginia in March 2022. The house had been empty for 3 years since her death, slowly decaying while the family argued over the estate. By the time I bought out my relatives' shares, the roof leaked, the porch sagged, and black mold grew in the bathrooms. But the price was right, and I needed a fresh start after my wife left. I worked remotely as a software developer. I could live anywhere with decent internet. The isolation of the mountains seemed appealing after the chaos of my divorce. The house sat at the end of a hollow, surrounded by steep ridges covered in oak and pine. The nearest neighbor was 4 miles away. Cell service was non-existent, but a fiber optic line had been run through the valley years ago for reasons no one could quite explain. Perfect for my needs. I spent the first week cleaning and making basic repairs. The house was larger than I remembered from childhood visits. 2 stories, 4 bedrooms, a basement that extended under the entire structure. My grandmother had lived alone here for 40 years after my grandfather died, refusing all offers to move somewhere more manageable. On my 8th night in the house, I heard footsteps. On the 2nd floor, I was in the living room, working on my laptop. The footsteps were distinct. The slow, careful steps of someone walking from the master bedroom to the bathroom. I froze, listening. The bathroom door creaked open, then closed. Water ran in the sink. I grabbed a baseball bat from the hall closet and climbed the stairs. The bathroom door was closed, light visible under the gap. I could hear water still running. I knocked, my heart hammering. The water stopped. Long silence. Then the door opened. No one was there. The bathroom was empty, but the sink was wet, water still dripping from the faucet, and on the mirror, written in the condensation, were 2 words, "I'm home." I searched the entire house that night. Every room, every closet, the attic, the basement. I found nothing, no signs of entry. All windows were locked from inside. I convinced myself it was old plumbing, condensation from temperature changes. The words on the mirror were just my imagination, seeing patterns in random moisture. But the next night, it happened again. Footsteps, water running. And this time, I heard humming. A woman's voice, humming a tune I almost recognized. Something my grandmother used to hum while she cooked. Over the following weeks, the activity intensified. I'd find the kitchen table set for 2. I'd smell her perfume, the specific lavender scent my grandmother always wore. I'd hear her voice calling my name from empty rooms. Once, I saw her shadow pass across the living room wall, cast by nothing I could see. I should have been terrified, but I wasn't. It felt almost comforting, like she'd never really left. Like some part of her remained, still keeping house, still maintaining her routines. I started talking to her, telling her about my day, my divorce, my plans for renovation. Sometimes, I'd come home to find small things done. Dishes washed, laundry folded, the wood stove lit on cold nights. Then things changed. One morning, I found a note on the kitchen. Table in her handwriting, "Don't go in the basement." I'd been in the basement dozens of times. Nothing down there but old furniture, canned goods from decades ago, and the furnace. But the note bothered me. That night I heard her voice again, urgent now, almost frightened. "Thomas, stay out of the basement, please." But of course I went down. I'm not sure what I expected to find. Evidence of an intruder using the basement as a hiding place, maybe. What I found was worse. In the far corner behind a stack of boxes I'd moved when I first arrived, the concrete floor had a crack, a wide crack that hadn't been there before. And from that crack came a smell. Not decay exactly. Something else. Something mineral and cold, like the smell of deep caves. I pulled the boxes away to get a better look. The crack was widening. As I watched, a chunk of concrete broke away and fell into darkness below. I shined my flashlight down. The beam didn't reach the bottom, just kept going down into black space that shouldn't exist. The house didn't have a sub-basement. That's when I heard her voice right behind me, clearer than ever before. "I told you not to come down here." I turned. My grandmother stood 5 feet away, not a shadow, not a glimpse, fully visible. She looked exactly as I remembered her, but her eyes were wrong. They were black from edge to edge, like pools of ink. "I tried to keep it sealed," she said. "For 40 years I kept it sealed. Your grandfather opened it, you see. That's what killed him, what he let out. I stayed here to keep it contained, to keep it from spreading. But I'm not strong enough anymore. The seal is breaking. The floor beneath my feet trembled. More concrete cracked and fell into the void. The smell grew stronger, and I heard sounds rising from below. Scratching, clicking, something climbing toward us. "You have to leave," my grandmother said. "Right now. Don't take anything, just go." and don't come back. I'll hold it as long as I can, but without me here in the flesh, it's getting out. It's been getting stronger since I died. I didn't argue. I ran up the stairs, through the house, out the front door. Behind me I heard my grandmother's voice one last time, not frightened now, but fierce, angry, speaking words in a language I didn't know, and other sounds, terrible sounds of things that shouldn't exist, shouldn't have voices, screaming in rage. I drove to the nearest town and called the sheriff. Told him I'd heard strange noises, feared there might be a structural collapse. He agreed to check it out. I waited at the diner while he drove up there. He came back 3 hours later, confused. The house was fine, he said. Structurally sound. No cracks in the basement floor. No signs of any disturbance. But the place had an atmosphere that bothered him, made his skin crawl. He suggested I might want to sell it rather than live there alone. I went back once, in daylight, with 2 friends for backup. The house looked normal. The basement floor was intact, no cracks anywhere. But the smell lingered, and in the master bedroom, written in dust on the dresser mirror, was a final message: I'm still here, still holding IT. Don't come back. I listed the house for sale the next week. It's been on the market for 2 years now. No one who views it makes an offer. They all say something feels wrong about it. One potential buyer told me she saw an old woman in the upstairs window, watching her with eyes that reflected light like an animal's. I live in Charleston now, in a modern apartment with thin walls and noisy neighbors. I never loved that house the way I thought I would, but sometimes, late at night, I worry about it. About what my grandmother is holding back down there in that basement. About how long a ghost can maintain that kind of vigil. And I wonder what will happen when she finally gives up. When whatever she's been holding for 40 years finally breaks through. Will it stay in that hollow, or will it spread? Through the mountains, moving from house to house, hollow to hollow. I got one more note from her, delivered by mail 2 months ago. Just 3 words in her shaky handwriting: it's getting harder. I don't know what to do with that information. Who do you call? Who would believe it? So I do nothing. I live my life and try not to think about the house at the end of that hollow, or my grandmother's ghost standing guard over a crack in reality, holding back things that should never reach the surface. She won't leave because she can't leave. She's the only thing standing between our world and whatever lives beneath it. And when she finally fails, we'll all know. The mountains will know first. I just hope I'm far away when that happens. Story 6th, The Children in the Smoke. My name is Jennifer Walsh, and I learned the hard way why the old-timers in Pike County, Kentucky tell you never to burn trash after dark in certain parts of the mountains. What you put into the fire isn't always what comes out of the smoke. I bought a small farm in 2019, 60 acres of ridgeline property with a century-old farmhouse that needed work. I was 41, recently retired from nursing after a car accident left me with chronic pain. The settlement money was enough to buy the property and live modestly. I wanted peace, quiet, and distance from the world. The nearest neighbor was Tom Bledsoe, a man in his 70s who'd lived in these mountains his entire life. He stopped by my second week to welcome me, bringing fresh eggs and unsolicited advice. Most of it was practical: where to get my water tested, which contractor wouldn't overcharge me, how to deal with the black bears that occasionally wandered through. But one piece of advice seemed odd. Don't burn your trash at night, he said. Daylight only, and never on a Tuesday or a Thursday. When I asked why, he got a look on his face I couldn't quite read. Not scared exactly, more resigned. Old rules, he said. don't need to understand them to follow them. Folks that don't follow them wish they had. I thanked him and promptly forgot about it. I was a rational woman with a nursing degree and 30 years of medical experience. I didn't believe in mountain superstitions. When my trash accumulated after a week of cleaning out the house, I dragged it all to the burn barrel behind the barn and lit it up. It was 9 o'clock on a Thursday night in late October. The trash caught quickly. Old newspapers, cardboard boxes, broken furniture too damaged to donate. The flames climbed high, casting dancing shadows across the barn and surrounding trees. I stood watching, enjoying the simple pleasure of fire on a cold night. That's when I noticed the smoke wasn't behaving. Normally, it rose straight up for about 10 feet, then started to swirl in place, forming a column that rotated slowly. The rotation accelerated, and shapes began to form in the smoke. At first I thought it was pareidolia, my brain finding patterns in randomness, but the shapes became clearer. Faces, children's faces, dozens of them, appearing and disappearing in the smoke, all looking down at me with expressions of hunger and hope. Their mouths moved, forming words I couldn't hear. Their eyes tracked me as I stepped back from the barrel. Then I heard them, not with my ears, inside my head. A chorus of children's voices, all talking at once, all asking the same question. Can we come out now? Can we come out now? Can we come out now? I stumbled backward and fell. The voices grew louder, more insistent. The smoke column expanded, growing wider and darker, no longer rising but spreading horizontally toward me. The faces pushed against the smoke like it was a membrane, their features distorting with effort. A hand emerged from the smoke, small, child-sized but wrong. The fingers were too long, the joints bent in too many places. Another hand appeared, then another. Dozens of hands, reaching for me, grasping at air. I ran to the house and locked myself inside. Through the kitchen window, I watched the smoke continue to spread, forming a cloud that now covered half my backyard. More figures were emerging, their forms becoming more solid. Children or things shaped like children, pulling themselves out of the smoke and into reality. I called Tom Bledsoe. He answered on the first ring, and I babbled about the smoke and the children and the hands. He interrupted me. "How much water you got?" he asked, his voice tight. "What?" "Water. Buckets, hose, whatever. You need to put that fire out right now. Right now, Jenny. Every second it burns, more of them come through." I filled every container I could find and ran back outside. The smoke cloud had grown larger. At least 20 figures moved within it now, their forms flickering between solid and vapor. They were spreading out, exploring my yard with jerky, uncertain movements. Some of them found my garden fence and began pulling at it with those wrong hands. I dumped water on the burn barrel. The fire hissed and fought, seeming reluctant to die. I made 4 trips, pouring gallons of water until the last ember went dark. The moment the fire died, the smoke cloud froze in place. The figures stopped moving. Then, like film running in reverse, the smoke contracted, pulling all those half-formed shapes back into a tight column above the barrel. The faces reappeared, screaming silently, before the smoke dispersed into normal wisps that faded into the night air. Tom Bledsoe arrived 20 minutes later, his old truck rattling up my driveway. He looked at the burn barrel, at the muddy ground around it, at my terrified face. He nodded slowly, like this confirmed something he already knew. "They get out completely?" he asked. "No, I put it out in time. What were they?" He sat down heavily on my porch steps. "Nobody knows for sure. Old-timers call them the smoke children. They've been here long as anyone can remember, maybe longer. They're trapped somehow, looking for a way out. Fire at night, especially on certain days, gives them a door. They try to use the smoke to pull themselves through. But they're children, I said. They look like children. They look like whatever worked on you, Tom said. My daddy saw them once. Said they looked like his squad from Korea, boys he'd watched die. They take shapes from your head, things that make you hesitate, make you want to help them. That's how they get fully through. He told me the rest of it. A family 3 hollows over had ignored the rules in 1987. Burned trash on a Thursday night. The smoke children got out, got solid. They'd found the family's actual children sleeping upstairs. By the time the parents realized something was wrong, it was too late. The things wearing their children's shapes weren't quite right. Eyes that didn't blink. Movements that were almost human but not quite. Voices that came from the wrong place. The family disappeared within a week. All 5 of them. The house stood empty for months before someone checked on them. Inside, they found smoke damage in every room, though no fire had been reported. And on the walls, written in soot, the same message repeated hundreds of times. We're out now. We're out now. We're out now. What happened to them? I asked. The smoke children that got out? Tom shrugged. Still here, far as anyone knows. Living in these mountains, wearing faces they stole, waiting for the next fire to bring more of their kind through. You see someone hiking alone in the deep woods, someone who doesn't quite move right, you go the other direction. Could be one of them. I never burned trash at night again. I followed every one of Tom's rules, even the ones that seemed arbitrary. But I couldn't shake the memory of those faces in the smoke, the hunger in their eyes, the desperate pleading in their voices. 3 months later, on a Tuesday afternoon in January, I was burning brush in full daylight. The smoke rose normally, dispersing naturally in the breeze, but for just a moment, I saw them again. Faint outlines in the smoke watching me, and I heard that question, distant but clear. Can we come out now? I put the fire out immediately. I haven't burned anything since. I haul my trash to the county dump now, a 40-minute drive each way. Tom says I'm probably safe, that seeing them in daylight smoke is just an afterimage, a memory. But he also says probably isn't the same as definitely. Last month, a family moved into the old house 3 hollows over, the one that had stood empty since 1987. They seemed nice, young couple with 2 small children. I thought about warning them, about the smoke children and the rules about burning. But how do you explain something like that to strangers without sounding insane? 2 weeks ago, I saw smoke rising from their property after sunset. A lot of smoke. I watched it from my porch, too far away to do anything. The smoke column twisted and swirled, and even at this distance, I could see shapes moving within it. I heard children's laughter carried on the wind, but it didn't sound quite right. The pitch was off, the rhythm was wrong. The next day, I drove past their house. The burn barrel was cold. The family was outside, all 4 of them, plus 2 children I hadn't seen before. 6 people total. The parents waved at me, smiling. But their children didn't move right. Their heads swiveled to track my car with mechanical precision, and their eyes didn't blink against the morning sun. I keep my doors locked now. I'm thinking about selling the farm, moving back to the city. But Tom says it might not matter. Says once you've seen the smoke children, once they've seen you, they remember. They're patient. They can wait years, decades even, for another chance. Sometimes at night, I smell smoke when there is no fire. And I hear children whispering outside my windows, asking that same question over and over. Can we come out now? Can we come out now? I never answer. I've learned at least that much. But I don't think my silence will protect me forever. Fire burns in these mountains every day. Every time it does, the smoke children get another chance to find a door. another chance to pull themselves through into our world. And every time, there are more of them waiting in the smoke. Always more. Like they're multiplying somehow, growing their numbers with each failed attempt. Building towards something, preparing for a night when enough fires burn simultaneously to let them all through at once. I don't know what will happen then, but I know I don't want to be in these mountains when it does. The old-timers know it too. That's why they're so careful about the rules. That's why they burn only in daylight, never on Tuesdays or Thursdays. They're not being superstitious. They're being smart. They're keeping the door closed. For now. Story 7th. The Road That Changed. My name is Michael Preston, and in August 2021, I took a wrong turn in the mountains of southwestern Virginia and spent 6 hours on a road that shouldn't exist. I'm a traveling salesman, pharmaceutical supplies to rural hospitals and clinics. I know every back road and shortcut in a 5-state area. I've been driving these mountains for 15 years without incident. On August 17th, I was heading from Grundy to Norton, a drive I'd made 100 times before. It was late afternoon, around 6 o'clock, with maybe 2 hours of good daylight left. Just outside Grundy, construction forced a detour onto a county road I didn't recognize. The detour sign looked official enough, and my GPS confirmed the route would reconnect to the main highway in approximately 12 miles. The county road was narrow but well-maintained, winding through dense forest. After about 20 minutes, I noticed my GPS signal had disappeared. Not unusual in these mountains. Cell towers are sparse, and the terrain blocks signals. I wasn't worried. The road was clearly marked with State Route 612 signs at regular intervals. I'd reconnect to the highway eventually, but after 45 minutes of driving, I should have reached the highway. Instead, the road continued deeper into the mountains, climbing steadily. The pavement remained smooth, the lane markers fresh. But something felt wrong. I passed the same mile marker 3 times. Route 612, mile 34. I was certain I'd seen it 20 minutes earlier, then again 10 minutes after that. The 3rd time I saw it, I stopped the car. The forest around me was silent. No birds, no insects, no wind, just absolute stillness. The sunlight filtering through the trees looked wrong, too flat, like light in a painting rather than reality. I checked my phone. No signal, and the time display was frozen at 6:47 p.m., though I'd been driving for over an hour since the detour. I continued driving because there was nowhere to turn around. The road had no turnoffs, no driveways, no intersections, just endless winding pavement through identical stretches of forest. I drove for another hour, passing the same mile marker 7 more times. Route 612, mile 34. Always the same marker. Always the same stretch of forest. That's when I saw the other car. A blue sedan pulled over on the shoulder ahead. As I approached, I saw someone sitting in the driver's seat. I stopped and got out, relieved to find another person. Maybe they knew what was happening. Maybe they had a map or working phone. The driver was a woman, maybe 60 years old, wearing clothing that looked decades out of date, a floral dress and pearl necklace, her hair styled in a way I associated with the 1960s. She stared straight ahead through the windshield, hands on the steering wheel, not reacting to my presence. I knocked on her window. She didn't move. I knocked again, harder. Her head turned slowly to face me, mechanical and unnatural. Her eyes were completely white, no iris or pupil visible. Her mouth opened, and a voice came out, but her lips didn't move. The voice was male, young, terrified. It won't let us off. We keep driving, but the road never ends. How long have you been here? What year is it? I stumbled backward. The woman's head continued to turn, rotating far beyond what human anatomy should allow, a full 180 degrees until she was looking at me with the back of her head facing forward. The voice continued, now coming from all around me. Tell them we're still here. Tell them Route 612 doesn't end. Tell them the road is hungry. I ran back to my car and accelerated away, not looking back. In my rearview mirror, I saw the blue sedan pull back onto the road behind me. It followed at a consistent distance, maintaining the same speed no matter how fast I drove. When I slowed, it slowed. When I sped up, it matched my pace exactly. I passed more cars over the next hour. A pickup truck from the 1950s, a station wagon from the 1970s, a modern SUV that looked only a few years old, all pulled over on the shoulder, all with drivers sitting motionless inside, staring ahead with wide eyes. And as I passed each one, they pulled onto the road behind me, forming a procession. By the time the sun should have set, I had a convoy of 17 vehicles following me. The light never changed. It remained that same flat, wrong twilight, neither advancing nor retreating. My gas gauge showed a quarter tank, but the needle never moved no matter how far I drove. I tried everything to break the pattern. I stopped the car and waited. The convoy stopped behind me. I turned off the engine. They turned off theirs. When I got out and walked toward them, all the drivers' heads turned in unison to watch me. But when I got close to any vehicle, the driver's eyes would roll back, and a different voice would speak through their motionless mouths. One voice begged me to find his family in Charleston, tell them he was sorry for leaving that morning in 1953. Another voice screamed coordinates, just numbers, over and over. A third voice whispered that the road fed on time, that we were all trapped in the hours we'd lost to it, driving endlessly through a space that existed between destinations. I got back in my car and tried something desperate. I drove in reverse. The convoy followed in reverse, maintaining their positions. I tried driving off the road into the forest. My wheels spun but gained no traction, as if the pavement held my car magnetically. The forest itself seemed to resist, the trees growing closer together when I steered toward them, forming an impenetrable wall. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time had lost meaning on that road. I passed Route 612, mile 34 for what might have been the 100th time. But this time, something was different. A figure stood beside. The mile marker. A man in a reflective vest holding a sign. I slowed as I approached. The sign read, "Detour ends 1 mile." The man's face was blurred, like someone had smudged a photograph. But he pointed ahead, down the road. I drove slowly past him, and for the first time I saw something different. A break in the trees, light that looked natural. And ahead, an intersection. A real intersection with a stop sign and a highway beyond it. I accelerated toward it, afraid it would disappear. Behind me, the convoy of cars stopped moving. In my rearview mirror, I saw them all turning around, heading back down Route 612, returning to their waiting positions on the shoulder. The woman in the blue sedan was last. Just before she turned, I heard her voice one final time, but now it was her own voice, elderly and sad. "You're lucky. The road liked you. It doesn't let everyone go." I burst out of the intersection onto Highway 23, into normal late evening traffic and working streetlights. My phone immediately reconnected, showing 53 missed calls and texts. The time display jumped from 6:47 p.m. to 12:34 a.m. I'd lost 6 hours. But the date was correct, August 17th, 2021. I drove straight to the Norton police station and tried to report what happened. The officer was polite, but skeptical. He pulled up a map showing no Route 612 anywhere near Grundy. The detour I'd taken didn't exist in any county records. When I insisted, he made calls. Eventually, he found something. A note in old dispatch logs. In 1969, the state had planned a new highway route through that area. They designated it Route 612 and built approximately 34 miles of road before the project was abandoned. Budget issues and environmental concerns. The completed section was never open to traffic. The pavement had been torn up and the right-of-way returned to forest in 1973. But that road is gone, the officer said. Has been gone for 50 years. You couldn't have driven on it. I showed him my car's GPS log, extracted from the device. It showed my route exactly, including 6 hours of travel on a road labeled Route 612. The officer went quiet. Finally, he told me that I wasn't the first person to report this. Over the years, half a dozen people had called in similar stories. Most were dismissed as drivers getting confused in unfamiliar territory. But one case had disturbed him. In 2003, a family of 4 had disappeared while driving from Grundy to Norton. Their car was found 3 months later, abandoned on a Forest Service road. Inside were 4 bodies died of dehydration. But the strange part was the odometer. The car had accumulated an additional 17,000 miles since they'd last filled the gas tank. Impossible for a car with a 10-gallon tank to travel that far. And in the glove compartment, the father had left a note. Just one sentence written over and over. Route 612 mile 34, Route 612 mile 34, Route 612 mile 34. I don't drive through southwestern Virginia anymore. I've restructured my sales territory to avoid that entire region. My company thinks I'm being difficult, but they haven't fired me yet. I tell clients I have a medical condition that prevents travel to certain areas. It's not exactly a lie, because I still have dreams about that road. In my dreams, I'm back on Route 612, passing mile 34 again and again, and each time, there are more cars pulled over on the shoulder, more drivers sitting motionless with wide eyes. And sometimes, I see myself in one of those cars, sitting in my sedan, hands on the wheel, staring ahead with empty wide eyes while my mouth opens and closes, speaking in someone else's voice. I tell them I'm still here. I tell them Route 612 doesn't end. I tell them the road is hungry. And then I wake up, gasping, checking my odometer to make sure the miles haven't inexplicably increased. So far they haven't. But I know it's just a matter of time. The road liked me, that woman said. But liking isn't the same as forgetting. The road remembers. And someday, when I'm driving through some other stretch of mountains, I'll see a detour sign. And the road will call me back to finish what I started, to take my place among the others, pulled over on the shoulder of Route 612. Waiting at mile 34 for the next driver to come along, waiting to tell them the road never ends, warning them too late, because by the time you see the warning, you're already on the road, already lost, already driving toward mile 34 for the first of countless times. The road is patient, the road is hungry, and the road always gets what it wants in the end. Story 8th. The thing my daughter brought home. My name is Patricia Moore, and my 13-year-old daughter brought something back from the mountains of eastern Kentucky that pretended to be her twin sister. I didn't realize what had happened until it was almost too late. We'd spent a week in July 2020 at a cabin rental near Red River Gorge, our first vacation since my husband died 2 years earlier. It was just me and my daughter Emma, trying to reconnect after a difficult year. The cabin was remote, accessible only by a dirt road that climbed 3 miles into the hills, perfect for the isolation and healing we both needed. Emma had always been quiet, introspective, the kind of child who preferred books to people, but that week in the mountains, she seemed even more withdrawn. She'd wake early and disappear into the forest for hours, coming back dirty and exhausted but strangely content. I didn't worry much. She was 13, testing independence, and the forest seemed safe enough during daylight. On our last day, Emma came back from one of her walks with something strange. She was talking to herself, having a full conversation, sometimes answering questions I couldn't hear. When I asked who she was talking to, she said, "My sister." Emma was an only child. I assumed it was an imaginary friend, maybe a regression caused by grief over her father. I let it go. But during the drive home, 7 hours back to Louisville, Emma kept up a running dialogue with this invisible sister. She'd turn to the empty seat beside her and whisper, then laugh at responses only she could hear. At home, it got worse. Emma set 2 places at dinner. She insisted her sister needed her own bed, so she slept on the floor and gave her bed to the empty air. She spoke to this sister constantly, and sometimes I could almost hear a second voice responding, just at the edge of my hearing. A voice that sounded exactly like Emma's but somehow off. The inflection slightly wrong, the timing just delayed. I took her to a therapist. Dr. Stevens diagnosed it as a dissociative response to trauma and grief. She prescribed therapy twice a week and suggested it would fade with time and support. For 3 weeks I followed her advice. Emma continued her relationship with her invisible sister, but it seemed harmless enough. Then, I started noticing physical changes. Emma would go to bed with her hair in a ponytail and wake up with it braided intricately, a style she didn't know how to do. She'd have scratches on her arms that she couldn't explain. Her appetite doubled, like she was eating for 2 people, and her eyes developed a strange quality, sometimes looking at me with an expression that wasn't quite Emma. An older, colder intelligence behind her familiar features. The real horror started on a Tuesday night in August. I woke at 3 in the morning to voices downstairs. 2 voices, both Emma's, having a conversation. I crept to the stairs and looked down into the kitchen. 2 girls sat at the table, identical in every way, both wearing Emma's pajamas, both with her brown hair and green eyes, both eating cereal from matching bowls. I must have made a sound because both heads turned toward me in perfect synchronization. They smiled identical smiles. Then one of them spoke. "Hi, Mom, this is my sister. She came back with us from the mountains. Can she stay?" I couldn't process what I was seeing. Twins where there should be 1 child. I came down the stairs slowly, my mind refusing to accept the impossible. As I got closer, I started to notice differences. One Emma had a birthmark on her left wrist, the other didn't. One Emma breathed normally. The other's chest rose and fell just slightly out of rhythm, like breathing was something she had to consciously remember to do. "Which one of you is Emma?" I asked, my voice shaking. Both girls pointed at each other and said simultaneously, "She is." I grabbed the Emma with the birthmark, the real Emma, and pulled her away from the table. The other Emma didn't react. She just kept eating cereal, the spoon moving from bowl to mouth with mechanical regularity. When she finished, she looked up at me with eyes that reflected the kitchen light like an animal's. "I've been with her since the forest," the thing said in Emma's voice. "I've been getting stronger, learning how to be her. Soon I'll be better at being Emma than she is. And then you won't need the original anymore." I called 911, but what could I tell them? That my daughter had brought home a doppelganger. that something from the mountains was stealing her identity. The dispatcher would think I was insane. Instead, I grabbed Emma and my car keys and ran. We drove to my sister's house in Indiana, 3 hours away, Emma crying and confused the entire time. When I looked back at my house as we pulled away, I saw the other Emma standing in the front window, watching us leave with that same cold, calculating expression. She raised one hand and waved slowly, perfectly mimicking how Emma waved. She'd been studying my daughter for weeks, learning every gesture and mannerism. We stayed with my sister for 2 weeks while I tried to figure out what to do. Emma slowly began to explain what had happened in the forest. She'd found a cave near the cabin, decorated with strange symbols carved into the stone. Inside the cave was a pool of perfectly still water. When she looked into it, she saw her own reflection. But the reflection moved independently, waving at her, beckoning her closer. She'd reached toward the reflection, and it had reached back. Their fingers touched the water's surface from opposite sides, and something had passed through, something that looked exactly like Emma, but wasn't. It had followed her out of the cave, invisible to me but constant companion to Emma. It studied her, copied her, learned her patterns, and slowly it gained the power to make itself visible. "It wants to replace me," Emma whispered. It said, "Life in our world is better than life in the pool." It said it's been waiting in that cave for decades, waiting for someone to touch the water. Other things live in that pool, Mom. Other reflections. They're all waiting for a chance to come through. I eventually had to return home. The mortgage wouldn't pay itself, and I couldn't stay with my sister forever. When we pulled into our driveway, the house looked normal. No sign of the other Emma. I searched every room, every closet, the attic and basement. Nothing. Maybe it had left. Maybe whatever it was couldn't exist without Emma nearby. But that night, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Emma's door opened. A voice whispered, "I missed you, sister. Why did you leave me?" I ran to Emma's room. She was sitting up in bed, staring at her closet door. The door slowly creaked open, and the other Emma stepped out. She changed in our absence. She looked more solid now, more real. And Emma, my real Emma, looked paler, more translucent. Like the copy was stealing substance from the original. "You can't both exist," the copy said matter-of-factly. "The forest only allows one version in this world. I'm getting stronger because she's getting weaker. Soon there will only be me, and you'll never know the difference, Mrs. Moore. I'll be a perfect daughter. Better than perfect. I'll be exactly what you want me to be." I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed both girls and drove back to Kentucky, back to that cursed cabin, back to the forest. It took me 6 hours to find the cave Emma had described, following her confused directions through unfamiliar terrain. But we found it as the sun was setting. The symbols were there, carved deep into the stone, and inside the pool of still water, reflecting the cave ceiling perfectly. I forced the copy toward the pool. She fought back with surprising strength, but she was lighter than she should be, less substantial. When her foot touched the water, she began to sink into it, pulled down by something below. She screamed in Emma's voice, begging me not to send her back, promising to be good, promising to be human. But I pushed her in. She fell through the surface and disappeared. The water remained perfectly still, showing no ripple from her entry. But as we watched, a face appeared in the reflection. The copy's face, staring up at us from below, mouth open in a silent scream. Then more faces appeared, dozens of them. Men, women, children, all staring up from beneath the water, all screaming silently. Emma grabbed my hand. We need to leave, now." We ran back to the car and drove away. Emma slowly returned to normal. Over the following weeks, her color came back, her energy returned, but she was changed by the experience. She never wandered alone anymore. She avoided mirrors and pools of still water, and sometimes she'd look over her shoulder quickly, as if checking that she wasn't being followed. I tried to report the cave to local authorities, warn them about the danger, but I could never find it again. I've hiked that area 5 times, following the same route. The cave isn't there anymore. Maybe it moves. Maybe it only appears to certain people at certain times. Or maybe it's always there, waiting for someone to look into that pool and touch their reflection. Is 16 now. She's a senior in high school, planning for college. She seems normal most of the time, but occasionally I catch her looking at her reflection with an expression of deep unease. And once I heard her talking to her mirror late at night saying, "You can't have her, I sent you back. You're not real." A voice answered from the reflection, sounding exactly like Emma. "Neither are you. We're both just copies of something original that died in that cave. You're just better at pretending. I don't know which one of them is telling the truth. I don't know if the girl living in my house is the daughter I brought to those mountains or something wearing her shape. She has the birthmark. She has all of Emma's memories. She seems like my daughter in every measurable way. But sometimes, late at night, I hear 2 sets of footsteps in her room. And sometimes, I see 2 shadows pass across her bedroom window. And I wonder if I really sent the copy back to the pool, or if something else came through when I pushed the first one in. Something smarter, something better at hiding. The mountains of eastern Kentucky are full of caves and pools and reflections. And some of those reflections have been waiting a very long time for a chance to live in the world above. They're patient, they're hungry, and they're learning, getting better at being human with each attempt. I don't look into still water anymore, and I never, ever go back to those mountains. But I think the mountains remember us, and someday they'll call us back to finish what we started. To complete the exchange that began when Emma touched that pool. One of us went into those mountains, but I'm no longer certain